You're walking through the Vatican's secret archives, past miles of shelves containing documents that could rewrite history. Your footsteps echo in corridors where only a handful of people are allowed each year. And somewhere in these temperature-controlled vaults, behind locked doors and careful cataloguing systems, lies evidence of one of history's most explosive discoveries. A find so dangerous that it's been buried for 7 centuries. What if I told you that the Vatican has known all along what the Knights Templar really discovered beneath Solomon's temple? That the mysterious artifacts and knowledge that made the Templars the most powerful organization in medieval Europe are sitting right now in papal vaults, carefully hidden from the world. Because what they found wasn't just gold or ancient relics. It was something that could shake Christianity to its very foundations. You've heard fragments of this story before. The Knights Templar, warrior monks who rose from nothing to become Europe's first international banking empire. Their sudden wealth, their secretive rituals, their brutal suppression on Friday the 13th. But the official history, the one taught in universities and written in textbooks, barely scratches the surface. Tonight, we're going deeper. We're following a trail of evidence that leads straight to the heart of Vatican City, where the most dangerous secret in Christian history may still be locked away. But to understand what the Vatican knows, we have to start where it all began. Jerusalem, 1119. 9 French knights arrive at the holiest site in Christianity, claiming they want to protect pilgrims on the dangerous roads to the Holy Land. They're given quarters on the Temple Mount, directly above the ruins of Solomon's temple. Officially, they're there to guard travelers. Unofficially, they're about to change the course of history. For 9 years, these knights barely left their headquarters. 9 years of digging in secret, excavating beneath one of the most sacred sites on earth. And then, almost overnight, everything changed. The poor knights who had arrived with nothing suddenly possessed wealth beyond imagination. They built castles across Europe, created the first international banking system, and amassed power that made kings nervous and popes dependent. What did they find down there in those dark tunnels beneath Jerusalem? The official story says nothing significant, just some old pottery, maybe a few coins. But that explanation falls apart when you look at what happened next, because the Templars didn't just get rich, they got dangerous. Within decades, they were operating outside normal church hierarchy. Their grand masters answered to no one except the Pope himself. They developed their own currency, their own laws, their own military. They built a network of fortresses and preceptories that stretched from Portugal to the Holy Land. And most mysteriously of all, they began conducting rituals that even their own members weren't allowed to discuss. Church records from the period, the ones that survived, hint at something extraordinary. References to ancient wisdom, to secrets that predate Christianity itself. Documents speak of artifacts that could prove or disprove fundamental Christian beliefs. And always, there are mentions of something being hidden, something being protected, something too dangerous for the world to know. But here's where the story takes a turn that most people never hear about. Because the Templars weren't just collecting artifacts. They were documenting everything. These were educated men, scribes and scholars as much as warriors. Every discovery was catalogued, every piece of evidence carefully recorded. They created detailed inventories of their finds, maps of their excavations, translations of ancient texts they uncovered. And when King Philip of France moved against them in 1307, when he had them arrested on charges of heresy and devil worship, most of those records vanished. Not destroyed, not burned with the knights who refused to confess, vanished. As if someone had quietly collected them all and spirited them away to safety. The trial records that survive tell us something fascinating. Under torture, many Templars spoke of a great secret, knowledge that had been passed down from the earliest days of Christianity. They mentioned artifacts that could challenge the authority of the Church itself, and several, before they died, claimed that their discoveries had already been shared with certain high-ranking church officials. Pope Clement V, who officially disbanded the Templars, never condemned them for heresy. Despite years of accusations and confessions extracted under torture, the papal bull that dissolved their order carefully avoided declaring them guilty of the charges against them. Instead, it cited political necessity and the scandal surrounding their trials. Almost as if the Pope knew something that couldn't be made public. And here's the detail that changes everything. In the months before the mass arrests, Templar treasure ships left their ports in France under cover of darkness. Their destinations were carefully hidden, but church records show unusual activity at certain papal territories during the same period. Increased security, expanded storage facilities, new restrictions on access to certain archives. The Vatican has always claimed that they have no special knowledge about what the Templars found, but their actions tell a different story. Within years of the Templars' suppression, the Church began one of the most comprehensive document collection programs in history. Papal agents scoured Europe, gathering manuscripts, artifacts, and records from dissolved monasteries and disbanded religious orders. They didn't just collect Christian documents. They sought out Jewish texts, Islamic manuscripts, anything that might contain references to the Temple period in Jerusalem, ancient genealogies, Gnostic Gospels, apocryphal writings that had been excluded from the biblical canon, all of it flowing into Vatican vaults that were rapidly expanding to accommodate the influx. Modern researchers who have gained limited access to Vatican archives report something curious. Entire sections are classified at levels above top secret. Not just diplomatic correspondence or political documents that might embarrass modern governments. Religious texts, archaeological reports, genealogical records dating back to the first centuries of Christianity. When scholars request access to documents from the Templar period, they're often told the materials are too fragile to examine, or that they're being studied by Vatican researchers, or simply that they're not available for review. But leaked inventories suggest that some of the most sensitive Templar-related documents are housed in a special collection that requires direct papal authorization to access. And here's what makes this even more intriguing. In 2001, the Vatican issued a formal statement acknowledging that Pope Clement had secretly absolved the Templars of heresy charges before their dissolution. This document, known as the Chinon Parchment, had been sitting in Vatican archives for 7 centuries before being made public. If they were willing to hide papal absolution for 700 years, what else might they be concealing? What discoveries made by 9 knights digging beneath Solomon's temple could be so explosive that the most powerful religious institution in history would spend centuries ensuring they remained buried? The answer to that question lies in understanding not just what the Templars found, but why it was so dangerous that it had to disappear completely from historical record. The danger wasn't just in the objects themselves, but in what they revealed about the foundations of Christian authority. Because when you strip away the mythology and political maneuvering, the Templars had stumbled onto something that threatened the entire structure of papal power. Think about it this way. The Catholic Church built its legitimacy on the idea of apostolic succession, an unbroken chain of spiritual authority flowing from Jesus through Peter to every pope that followed. But what if evidence existed that challenged this narrative? What if documents survived from the Temple period that told a different story about early Christianity? The Jerusalem Temple wasn't just any archaeological site. It was the epicenter of Judaism during Jesus' lifetime, the place where religious and political power intersected. If the Templars found records from that period, they would have had access to contemporary accounts of events that later became the foundation of Christian belief. Imagine documents that describe Jesus not as the divine Son of God, but as a Jewish teacher and political revolutionary. Manuscripts that detailed his actual teachings before they were filtered through decades of oral tradition and political necessity. Records that named his disciples, his family, his real relationship with figures like Mary Magdalene. This kind of evidence wouldn't just be historically significant, it would be theologically catastrophic. Because the Church's authority doesn't just come from spiritual claims, it comes from historical ones. The entire structure of Christianity rests on specific events happening in specific ways at specific times. But there's an even more dangerous possibility. What if the Templars found proof that Jesus survived the crucifixion? Ancient texts speak of healing practices that could simulate death, of secret followers with access to the tomb, of appearances after the supposed resurrection that lasted for months rather than days. The Gnostic Gospels, many of which were discovered centuries after the Templars were disbanded, hint at exactly these kinds of alternative narratives. They describe Jesus teaching for years after his crucifixion, passing on secret knowledge to select disciples, establishing a bloodline that continued long after his death. If the Templars had access to similar documents, or even more damning evidence, they would have possessed the ultimate weapon against papal authority. Not just alternative interpretations of Christian doctrine, but proof that the entire foundation of the Church was built on carefully constructed mythology. This explains their rapid rise to power and their special relationship with successive popes. They weren't just wealthy knights with political influence. They were partners in a conspiracy of silence, holders of secrets that could destroy Christianity itself. And when that partnership became too dangerous, when the Templars grew too powerful and too independent, the Church had to act. But they couldn't simply destroy the evidence. Too many people knew it existed. Too many copies had been made. Too many other organizations had been built around protecting these same secrets. So instead, they absorbed it. They brought the most dangerous documents into Vatican archives, where they could be controlled, studied in secret, and used to maintain the Church's power rather than threaten it. This is why Vatican researchers have spent centuries studying early Christian texts that contradict official doctrine, not to disprove Christianity, but to understand exactly what threats exist and how to neutralize them. Every heretical gospel, every alternative genealogy, every document that suggests a different version of Christian origins has been carefully catalogued and analysed. The Vatican's secret isn't just that they know what the Templars found. It's that they've been using that knowledge for 7 centuries to maintain control over Christian narrative. They know which stories are true and which are politically necessary. They understand the difference between historical fact and religious truth. And they've built an entire system around managing that difference. When scholars get too close to dangerous discoveries, when archaeological evidence threatens official doctrine, when alternative narratives gain too much credibility, the Vatican intervenes. Not with violence or obvious suppression, but with careful misdirection, controlled access to information, and strategic releases of just enough truth to satisfy curiosity without revealing everything. Modern DNA testing, satellite archaeology, and advanced manuscript analysis have made it increasingly difficult to hide historical evidence. But the Vatican has adapted, becoming partners with researchers, funding expeditions, and ensuring that the most sensitive discoveries flow through their oversight. The Templars made the mistake of thinking they could use their secret knowledge for their own ends. They believed they could challenge the Church's authority while remaining part of the Christian world. But the Vatican learned from that mistake. They realized that the only way to protect dangerous secrets was to own them completely. Today, somewhere in those climate-controlled vaults beneath St. Peter's Basilica, the real history of Christianity waits in carefully organized files. Documents that prove Jesus was married, had children, survived his execution. Genealogies that trace his bloodline through centuries of European nobility. Archaeological evidence that places him in locations the Gospels never mention. All of it protected not by secrecy, but by institutional control. Because the Vatican discovered something the Templars never understood. The most dangerous truth isn't the one that's hidden. It's the one that's partially revealed, carefully managed, and used to maintain the very power structure it should destroy. So here we stand at the edge of one of history's most carefully guarded secrets. 7 centuries of silence, of documents locked away in papal vaults, of questions that can never quite be answered. The trail leads from 9 knights digging beneath Solomon's temple straight to the heart of Vatican City, where the most dangerous discovery in Christian history may still rest in temperature-controlled darkness. We followed the evidence through medieval records and modern mysteries, through suspicious papal behavior and carefully managed revelations, and what emerges isn't just a story about hidden treasure or ancient artifacts. It's a revelation about power, about truth, and about the lengths institutions will go to protect their authority. The Vatican knows what the Templars found because they made sure to know. They absorbed the secret, controlled it, and turned it into the foundation of their continued influence. And somewhere in those endless corridors of archives, past doors that require papal authorization to open, the real story of Christianity waits in silence. The question isn't whether these secrets exist. The question is whether we're ready for what they might reveal about everything we thought we knew. Because some truths, once uncovered, can never be buried again.